Welcome back to B-Side Banter. This is episode number 5. We are here with Kasey from Kasey's Playlist. You probably know her on TikTok or other social media platforms. Super excited to get into this conversation. And I'm just going to hand it right over to you, Kasey. Just tell us a little bit about yourself, what you do, anything like that.
Totally. I've been making TikToks about indie music for almost 5 years now, which is pretty crazy to think about.
Yeah.
I started off doing it when I was in college and the pandemic hit, and I was just, looking for ways to be involved in the music industry and, interact with all of my friends who were artists who, were struggling through touring not existing and, all of those crazy times. I just got very lucky that some people paid attention, and Kasey's Playlist has now been going for as long as it has. So I've got the TikTok, I've got the Instagram where, I'm posting my videos and New Music Friday updates and all of that. And then I also have my Spotify where I curate playlists for pretty much any moment of life. I think they're all very hyper specific and mood based. And yeah, it's just been a lot of fun. It's been kind of my passion project for the past 5 years, and it's been such a joy.
That's awesome. Yeah, I found you. I was telling you before from the guest on the previous episode. I found you through him. He had a video where he's basically just detailing his formula to, I guess, the lists that he would look through to find new music, and you were one of them. So I was like, oh, I should check her out. And you're just in such a cool niche that I think, at least I haven't seen a lot of people in that specific niche where your focus is just indie, and that might be rock, that might be folk, that might be pop. You're not so much into the hip hop side of things, it doesn't seem, but you're those three for sure. And it's pretty awesome because that is a really, really hard genre set to find really good music. You can kind of get lost in that indie thing because there's so much indie music out there, and most of it's pretty good. I'm sure you've kind of discovered that most of it's pretty good stuff, but sometimes you can get down some rabbit holes where you're like, whoa, what is this?
Totally. It's a lot to filter through. It's such a broad genre in terms of, just sonically how everything ends up and, ways to discover artists and all of that. Yeah, it can definitely feel like a lot to sift through. So I try to kind of be that voice of here are things that are good.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've said this to anybody. I actually think most of my guests so far have been all new music people. You guys are so brave and courageous, and you're really taking one for the team because it's so much work and so much pressure to be doing all this Thursday night basically and into Friday. You're taking one for the team, and it's great because I tried to do that at a time, and I was like, I cannot keep up with this. So
it's a lot for
brave.
sure. Yeah, I feel like moving to the West Coast has honestly made my life so much easier on that one, because when I was living in New York, it was all of the music would drop at midnight, and then I would have to go through, do all of my listening, which would usually be an hour or so of just getting through all of the tracks that I wanted to listen to, and then editing the video and doing that thing. And usually I was up until 3 every Thursday night when I was living in New York, which was so crazy. And then I would wake up and post it immediately, usually at 7 or 8. And I think that's a lot of what allowed my New Music Friday videos to kind of thrive, was just that they were always up early and they were always up consistently.
Yeah, totally.
But yeah, oh my God, did it take a toll on my sleep schedule and everything. It was really not the vibe. And moving to LA has helped a lot because now all of the music turns over at 9 p.m. So
yeah, that's
much
amazing.
Easier. I'm in bed by a normal hour. Thank God nowadays.
Yeah, maybe the latest you would be, if it's a crazy release time, would be maybe 1. I don't know. Maybe it'd be
totally. It's it's really not as bad anymore, thank goodness.
Yeah. Well, I at one point I was living in Canada, in Atlantic Canada, and they're on Atlantic time, which is actually an hour ahead of Eastern.
Oh my God.
So music would drop at 1 in the morning. So it was can't even do this. Can't do it at all. So...
Oh my God, no. I would be quitting at that point. There's no way. I've keep getting in that level of effort. That's intense for sure.
I know. Yeah, it's a lot. It is a lot. Well, I do want to talk about indie music, and I kind of want you to do a little bit of a deep dive. That can look whatever you want it to be, but basically what is indie? Because I think some people get confused because to some degree, indie is like independent of
Mhm.
labels and whatever, distributors, whatever that might mean. But it's also become like a genre at the same time. So like do a little bit of deep dive and maybe a little bit of why you love indie music so much as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think the debate of, what is indie music is a debate that's going to go on forever. I think nobody really knows.
Mhm.
When I first started my TikTok, I remember it was like such a common comment where I would like post something being like, here's indie music, that I like or whatever, and people would comment being like, well, they're signed to a label. Like this isn't indie music, whatever. And I would be like,
Yeah.
well, but like I mean, indie music in a broader sense, like in
Mhm.
terms of the genre and in terms of whatever, it's like, yeah, I think it's a very complicated thing. To me, I definitely view it as a genre more than just like independent music.
Mhm.
I think sonically there is kind of a thread through all of it, that, yeah, just kind of like means something totally different to me. But yeah, I mean, ultimately indie music can take so many different forms that I feel like it's hard to really define.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, and people are like they get so salty when
Yes.
they
People on
especially on
TikTok
the
comments love to be mean for no reason. That is
yeah.
one thing I have learned over time.
Yeah, it's so crazy. And then you like look at their
A lot of
like
people who love to be who want to be told that they're right or like that
mm,
they're smarter or whatever, all of that. And it's just one of those things where I'm like,
yeah.
I don't think the debate of like what is indie music will ever be that deep personally.
Yeah, totally. Totally. And to you, what would kind of like define indie rock maybe or indie folk even? Like what would as a genre?
Totally. I think indie folk specifically is like very lyrically distinctive to me. I think
Mhm.
that's where I kind of find things being in their own lane. I think folk music obviously is like such a broad genre and like has so much history to it in,
Mhm.
culture and geography and, all of that. And I think, yeah, I think indie folk, especially lyrically, has taken a very like cool approach to things. And yeah, it's just like a space that I think has been really fun lately. I think it's characterized by a lot of emotion and a
Mhm.
lot of honesty and rawness. Yeah, that I think I've just like really resonated with lyrically over the past like decade of being an indie folk fan. And I think indie rock pretty similarly. I think there is like
Sure.
a characteristic level of emotion in the lyrics and sonically. I also think it's yeah, just like a little bit more kind of toned down from like a big rock record per se. I think
Yeah.
there's something that's a little bit more chill, usually a little bit more vibey. Yeah, it just I don't know. I think it takes a different form.
And who would be some artists that would be like because none of this is necessarily going to be mainstream, but like who would be some artists that would be as close to mainstream as you can kind of get in indie folk or indie rock?
Totally. I mean, I think when it comes to indie folk, the biggest one right now is Noah Kahan. I think
Mm.
he's really bridged that gap from
Yeah.
just into being like a very mainstream artist, who's
Yeah.
selling out Madison Square Garden multiple nights and,
Totally.
doing all
Yeah.
of that stuff. I think he's really made that transition. But I think even despite that, I think he still makes indie folk music, and I think that's
Mm.
what makes him so great. I think he's a great example. I think Gigi Perez is also really towing
Mm.
that line right now. I think
Yeah.
she's one of the most incredible artists right now. I'm such a big fan of hers. And yeah, watching Sailor Song like go to number one was such a cool thing
Yeah.
to have happen because I think it's such a true indie folk song sonically.
Absolutely.
And yeah, it was so sick to see it, get so much recognition and,
Mm.
watch her kind of just catapult from there. I think those are probably the two most obvious examples to me.
Yeah, totally. And Noah Khan like was like I guess some people would probably debate now like he's no longer indie. You know what I mean? Like he's just
Totally.
like
Yeah, and I think that would be totally fair to say. I think
yeah.
in my head, sonically, it still fits into indie, but
Yeah,
I also
for
know that
sure.
that's completely subjective. I think,
Absolutely. Yeah.
it's I think ultimately up to whoever's listening and yeah.
Exactly. And I think most of that just comes from the fact that he like his glow up or whatever you want to call it, his breaking as an artist was so is probably one of the like maybe set aside like somebody like Chapel Roan. It's probably one of the biggest artist breakthroughs that we've had in a really long time. Like
Totally. Yeah.
he just yeah, catapulted himself to the front. He's, like you said, selling out Madison Square Garden. Yeah, and he's been riding Styx season for what feels like 10 years, but it's, he's finding a way to make all that stuff new, and he's, obviously he's got a great team behind him to be pushing his brand and his sound as far as it is. But yeah, it is really interesting, and it's kind of like pushing indie folk back into the forefront of kind of mainstream, where it hasn't been there for a little while. It kind of took a little sleep after like the downfall of, or maybe not the downfall, but after people weren't interested anymore with like Mumford and Sons and the Avett Brothers.
It had a really big moment, I think, around like 2013, 2014.
Yeah.
And I remember joking a couple years ago that it kind of felt like a 2013 revival of indie folk, because it was like,
Yeah.
I feel like that was such a big moment for it. And I don't think it went away by any means after that.
Yeah,
but
totally.
It just wasn't like really in the forefront of like pop culture as much, I think.
Absolutely.
For a little lull in between there. Yeah, and it's been awesome to watch that movement happen over the past couple of years. It's been really, really huge.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, it's a really cool genre to follow, and I remember like kind of being around the time that, like in that 2013 of like folk being like kind of the mainstream in a lot of ways. Like I remember that was one of my favorite genres at that point, and it was exciting. And then all of a sudden it felt like, whoa, like what's happening in this space? And it, like, whether it was just that the genre needed to reset, because like obviously the folk music doesn't sound like it did then.
Totally, yeah.
Like it's totally different now, and which is a good thing. I think that, for whatever reason, it needed a change, and now people are sold out for what it is now, and it's cool to see kind of that arc of the ups and downs of a genre.
Totally, yeah. Pop culture is a crazy thing. It wants
is.
what it wants.
Yeah, it's so fickle. It's
yes,
like
totally.
Oh gosh, yeah, that's awesome. So what? I guess in this vein, what would be like 5 artists, and you could do a few of these lists if you want, but what would like 5 artists to watch in 2025 be for you? So you could start like high, like these are really popular ones, and then these are some more like maybe less known ones. You can do that if you want, or you can just do 5 in general. Just
totally. Yeah. I mean, I think in terms of kind of more popular ones who I really see, just kind of reaching another level soon here, I think Rachel Chinariri is the first one to come to mind for me. I think she is just so incredible. Like, I think All I Ever Asked is probably my favorite indie pop song that's come out in the past 5 years. I think she's just an absolute legend. She has such a stage presence and such a voice, and like I'm really looking forward to watching her kind of reach a new level soon here. Opening for Sabrina Carpenter on an upcoming tour, and like,
oh wow, yeah,
really kind of getting a few of these like bigger looks right now. And she's been around for a long time and has been really grinding and putting out great work for a really long time. But yeah, it feels like things are like really leveling up for her right now in a way that I'm really excited about. Trying to think who else. I think Inhaler is definitely one for me too that I really see leveling up. I think they, obviously they've had some notoriety over the past couple years, when your lead singer is Bono's son. I think it's kind of hard to not have, a lot of press around you and,
totally.
whatever else. Yeah, I just think they're so great at what they do. And as an original U2 fan back in the day, I think it's been really cool to kind of see that spirit revived in rock music and really just kind of like have that era be coming back. So I think they've already been on a path for a while to doing something great, but I think I'm excited to really watch it go from there. I'm really excited for the new Samia record this year. I think similarly she's just incredible and has been putting out great records for a while, but I think this will be one that kind of takes a next step for her. Yeah, I think those are kind of the big ones for me off the top of my head, kind of on that level. And to move kind of more to like the developing side of things, I think May Simones is definitely a huge one for me right now. She is a really, really cool kind of experimental jazz artist with like some influences of indie folk in there too. And she's a record coming out, I think in a couple weeks now, that I'm so excited to hear. I got to see her play last week and the show is just amazing, and
awesome.
I'm excited to hear all of that music. Who else? Mercury is definitely a band I'm really excited about. I think they're breathing really new life into indie rock right now, and it's got a lot
Yeah.
of kind of energy and power to it. And yeah, I'm just really excited to kind of see what they're up to. The Army Navy is a big one for me lately. They just opened for Dora Jar on tour,
Okay.
and they're doing their first full North American headline run coming up, and they really seem to be selling some tickets and really have some like dedicated fans. And yeah, I just think their kind of like experimental folk vibe is so beautiful. Every time they harmonize, I feel like I just like want to cry. They're so great.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm really excited about them. Who else? Pool Girl has been a real favorite of mine lately. She's an indie pop artist. I had a friend joke that listening to her songs kind of feels like you're in a Wes Anderson movie, and I couldn't agree more. I think she just like sets a scene so beautifully and has such a vision as an artist. And yeah, I think she's so great. I think Love probably my last one. They're crushing it on socials lately and they're such a like compelling group. Yeah, and I'm excited to kind of see where their big personality leads them.
Yeah, for sure. What do you think, like, we can kind of get into a little bit of maybe what challenges are out there for these indie musicians, just because like they're, to be honest, I don't think I've heard of any of those artists that you said for your tier of in development. And like I might have heard a single because like from one of your videos or something like that, but not any names that I would be like, oh yeah, like I have been watching them. And I guess my question would be like, what are some of the biggest challenges for these artists? Because it's like we're in a world where technically anybody can break, but at the same time we're in a world where like it feels like that's kind of a false illusion a little bit.
Yeah.
So like there does have to be some like pretty like a decent amount of money involved to try to push, whether it's ads, whether it's paying for whatever. We're not naive anymore to the fact that labels like to purchase streams and views on TikTok and stuff like that. So like I guess what would you say in your mind are some of like these challenges for these artists that clearly are extremely talented but just are having such a hard time getting further?
Yeah, I mean, I think, like you said, it's a weird situation right now because, with TikTok, it does kind of have that illusion of anybody can break, anybody can have a viral moment, anybody can whatever. And, I think that's just really simplistic. And I just don't think that, necessarily tells the whole story of like what it is like to be an independent artist right now. I'm not one myself, so I can't claim to, be the spokesperson on behalf of all indie musicians, but in my conversations with people and in my own work outside of TikTok also, I mean the biggest thing, number one, unsurprisingly, is just money is a really important thing. And it costs a lot of it to get music made. Producers are expensive and mixers and masters and all of that. Like it all costs a lot of money to get a project off the ground. I think it's a lot more expensive than a lot of people realize it is, just to even get a song made. Beyond even getting the songs made, to be able to have the funds to market it and to be able to, get press on it and be able to, all of that stuff, I think is a whole nother story. So yeah, I think money is number one. And, even touring nowadays, I think it's just not a real source of income for artists nowadays. It's so deeply expensive to tour. And, if you're an opening artist on a club tour where you're making like $200 a night, and God knows that isn't even enough to pay for a hotel, so it just takes a lot of money. And I think that, is something that's really unfortunate about the state of the current industry. That's not to say you can't do it and, be scrappy with it and, figure out ways around. But, in order to find really quick and quote unquote easy success, I think it's really, really rare for that to happen without that baseline funding. I think beyond that, it's also an industry that's like extremely gate kept, and you have to have certain connections, and you have to just be able to put yourself in the right spaces. And I also think that that's just a really difficult thing to do. I don't think in any world, it's easy to just, put yourself into those positions without some sort of prior connection or, whatever it may be. So yeah, I think that's a lot of it. I also think just like keeping fans engaged nowadays is really difficult. We live in a content economy where like, you can have a brand new video from, a new artist that you love every 2 seconds. And, I think it's very easy to get lost in that and, have a hard time reaching your audience. I feel like I see artists all the time talking about how, they post on Instagram, but, only like 2% of their audience even sees the posts because
Yeah.
Instagram just isn't even pushing it,
Yeah,
all of
totally.
that stuff. I think,
Yeah.
finding ways to like not get lost and, still be able to connect with fans in a time where social media is kind of rigged against artists a lot of the time, I also think is really difficult. Yeah, I mean, ultimately being an indie musician has never been easy, but I think now definitely has its unique challenges for sure.
Yeah, totally. I think that it's just, yeah, it's getting, and maybe one of the challenges is like the mental hurdle of like
Totally.
thinking that it's going to be easier than it is, and thinking that at any moment you could have your break or whatever, when in reality the break actually takes a lot of like little mini things all at
Totally.
once, and like it's kind of a snowball thing. And yeah, it's one of those things where um I guess I just feel bad for artists, and feel like things were maybe easier at a time. And I think it's one of those like, yeah, there's certain things that are easier and certain things that are harder, and I think that's probably just the reality we live in. But yeah, indie music has always been something that's really interesting to me, and for a long time I felt like it was really like centralized in cities. Like certain cities would have like a genre like really breaking, and like you think of New York, or you think of, Anaheim for like the really like crazy kind of grunge-ish like alt rock in like the, I don't know, 2005 to 2015.
Totally. Yeah,
Like
you think of like
there's
the
all,
Strokes in the 2000s in New York, and
yeah,
yeah, totally.
yeah, and like you kind of have this nostalgia of like, oh, is that happening anymore? And I think like it is still, like there's still, you know um artists that are widely popular in a city and then
Mhm.
relatively unknown outside of that. Like a bigger artist that would kind of come to mind for that would be like Kurt Vile in
Mhm.
like Philadelphia. Like
Yeah, totally.
he's like a legend there. And it's like, for the most part, he is like he has a very interesting sound. So it's not like it's not like a mainstream sound, but like for how popular he is in that city, you would think like, oh, this popularity probably carries somewhere else. And it's like, no, not really. Like not as much. Like he's still pretty popular. Like he's still doing great.
Totally. Things can just be like very centralized in one place,
Yeah.
and it is interesting. Yeah, totally.
Yeah. Are there any like, do you kind of keep up with some of that? Like any like emerging like scenes, like not as much like an individual artist, but emerging like multiple artists that are, or like a genre that's really exploding somewhere? Like, do you keep up with any of that stuff?
Totally. Yeah, I think especially I lived in New York for 6 years before I moved to LA about a year and a
Mm,
half ago, and so I've I've lived in two very music centered cities,
yeah,
that kind of
absolutely.
have very vibrant and thriving scenes of their own.
Yeah.
And yeah, totally. I mean, I feel like I'm at shows almost every night,
Mm,
just seeing
hmm.
what's out there and meeting new people and just kind of like, putting myself in wherever the scenes are happening. Yeah, and I think totally these local scenes aren't ever going to go away. I think there is something
Yeah.
so special about, having a local community that really rallies behind a band and being able to go and see them and, all of that. I think that's something that is just so magical and perfect that I really
Yeah.
hope it never goes away.
Yeah, for sure.
And yeah, I think it's totally something that's huge in the indie music world nowadays.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. I'm in Nashville, so it's like I'm in the like kind of removed city from
Totally.
LA and New
The one in
York,
middle
where
America.
yeah, where it's like country. Well, there's a lot of folk here too,
There's a
but
lot of great indie music in Nashville too,
there
I will
is
say.
there
It's
is
got its
yeah,
own scene for sure.
it does. Yeah, it is. You have to do some work to get to anything that's like not country or kind of folk adjacent or whatever. Like you do if you want it. Like there is a little bit of like kind of, I don't know, rock, post-rock, like even metal or grunge scene here, and it's like you have to work really hard to get to it, but it's here.
Totally. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Um, let's maybe move on a little bit, and it's all kind of in the same vein here, but like when it comes to new music discovery, I guess because this is really your thing for sure, and especially because you're nailed down into a niche, it's even more like you're doing. I think you're doing more than the average even music reviewer that is like just looking at their new Music Friday thing, or like looking like you. I feel like you're doing like a little bit more research. You're almost like making it your mission to try to discover people that would never even be on your radar potentially. So I guess maybe just talk a little bit about that, what you do, why you think that's really important, and important to kind of get the word out for people to hear these new artists, and how we can kind of do our part as people that probably will never do as much work as you in this.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, it's obviously just like such a passion of mine to, help artists in whatever way that I can. As a music fan, I think there's nothing more exciting to me than knowing that like I can help music that I love get heard. I think that's just like always kind of been my thing. I think it's such an exciting, just like position to be in, especially having my TikTok. And yeah, I mean, I think in terms of what everyone can be doing, I think there are so many small things. I think, whether it's following an artist on Spotify so that you always know when they're releasing, or engaging with their content on social media, or going to shows and buying tickets, or, whatever it is. I think there are so many ways to help, even without, necessarily promoting songs anywhere or like spreading the word or whatever. I think it's really a lot easier than people might think. And I think that those kind of small little steps, just like end up making a lot of impact. But yeah, I mean, ultimately, I try to just be here to make music I love get heard, and it's been really cool getting to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sure it really has it. And I'm sure to some degree, like it's almost become like, I guess for myself, I should backtrack a little bit. Like whenever I've been in that space of trying to discover something new, I've always kind of felt like the chase and finding somebody that you're like, I really love this music, it becomes almost addicting. Like you just want to keep doing it, and you want to just keep finding new music, new artists that you love and that you can really relate to. Yeah, I feel like that's something that drove me for a while. Now it's just so overwhelming because there's so much new music, and it's like it's so hard to even at times kind of go through that. And like obviously time is a thing, but yeah, I'm sure for you, like you just love that pursuit and that chase.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, ultimately there is a selfishness to it. I like finding new music that I love.
Yeah.
I love finding things that I resonate with, so as much as I'm discovering new things for the sake of, the platform and, bringing things to TikTok or my playlist or whatever, I think it's also just that I want to listen to new things. And so, this is kind of a means for me to do that, which is also great. I think the things kind of go hand in hand in a nice way.
Yeah, totally. And you're like, I feel like on top of everything that we've kind of been talking about, you're not as much like, I feel like you're really just in the realm of music discovery. Like you do obviously review that and give, your thoughts on it, but in the sense of like a traditional reviewer that would just look at an album and be like, I hate this, or I love this, or I didn't like this. Like you stay away from kind of that the negative side of that, and you stick really with the positive side. Not that like, some people might be like, well, if you're only positive about things, then, you're not really telling the truth. And I don't think that's the case. I just think you much would rather just be a support to artists than to be kind of that voice of like listen to this or stay away from this. Like you
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think since starting my TikTok, it's always been a real mission of mine to just kind of be a positive, or have a positive impact, on the industry. I think there are so many people out there writing reviews and, saying they hate a certain album, whatever, that's what Pitchfork's for. Like, I get it. Like, I understand why that content exists totally. And, I think it has its own merit. And I think that, being able to look at, art critically is, a whole nother thing that is also completely valuable. But,
Yeah.
In terms of just kind of what energy I wanted to put out into the world, I think I just didn't ever really want to be the person who was putting up a video purely because I wanted to like say something was bad. Like, I just don't think that that's really in my personality. So
Yeah.
I mean, I think there's plenty of music that I don't like, and all the time I will listen to an album and I'm like, that was fine. Like, I don't really
Yeah.
want that, or I'm never going to listen to that again, or whatever. But I think for me, I would rather just not say anything about that and use that space and time and energy on uplifting something that I do like instead.
Yeah.
I just
Yeah.
think for me personally, that feels a little bit more productive and, just more aligned with why I'm here and, why I do what I do.
There is a time and a place for, the criticalness, whether in having that honesty of like, I'm going to be listening to albums and I'm going to assess whether they're good or
Totally.
bad.
I think there's totally a place for that. And,
Yeah.
there's value in it in its own way. It's just, not really what I want to do personally.
Hey, well, and there aren't a whole lot of people that are doing what you do in that sense. Like most people that have music content or music review channels are kind of doing that. They're following a specific genre and they're giving their opinion, whether it's a good or bad opinion, or a positive or negative opinion, on things. I think sometimes that can be tough because sometimes not just sometimes, I think a lot of people are very aware that negative opinions get a lot more views on social media than positive. So to go and say this was a horrible album, even if you might not even if you're only being like 80% honest, like even if you're like, oh, I kind of liked it, but that you kind of anyway, I think there's a reality where sometimes people get a little bit too negative in that sense. But yeah, I do think I think your channel is just really refreshing in the sense that you don't feel like a need to review everything. Like you don't feel like you need to review all of the biggest like releases in indie music. You just want to discover new things and you want to show what you like, and you're not as interested with what you maybe don't like or what you think is fine. You just want to be, I think that's really refreshing kind of in the landscape of maybe going and hearing some people's opinions that are quite negative, and sometimes you're wondering, is this just negative just so that you can get a few more views? But
Totally. Yeah, I think for me, I'm kind of just like, I'm not a musician. I will never claim to be. And I think there's a point where like, it's just not my place to say that I don't like something or something isn't good. I'm never going to pretend like I have, the authority on that. I think, I can promote things I think are good, but I think that's kind of where my place ends personally.
Yeah, absolutely. And I have existed in that space, and like I find that like, who am I to, even though I would say like this album wasn't that great, or like I didn't like this song at all, or whatever, who really am I? Like what authority do I have at all to
I'm
make
like, I don't have a number one album. Like who am I to say what is a good, at that point it's just.
And even if you have a number one album, most artists are like trying to be supportive of other artists. Like most artists aren't going to speak negatively about that, like, but anyway, like any critic in any industry, it is necessary because you do want there to be some form of accountability, but at the same time it's like not everybody is going to be in that space, so, and that's fine. Let's maybe you kind of touched on this a little bit, but to maybe wrap up, let's look a little bit at some exciting releases already in 2025, and like you could maybe focus in on like albums, because like obviously singles, there's probably so many to talk about, but maybe some like exciting releases. I know we're only a couple months in, but some exciting albums that you've really enjoyed in 2025, and then maybe you can also go from there and just talk about some releases that you're really looking forward to in this year.
For sure. Yeah, I think one that really caught my attention and I think surprised me for the better was the Say Gray album that came out last week. It's just so sonically interesting. I think it has so much texture to it, and the vocals are amazing. And it's been an album that I think I've just kind of had on repeat for the past week since it came out. And I think that's, the really big one that comes to mind. I also Love the Sam Fender record that came out last week. He's just so amazing. I'm such a big fan of his, and I have been for so long. And I think this album is, it's an emotional one, I think, and it's cool to really see that side of him. It really has some deeper songs on it than I think we've ever seen from him before. So I'm really excited about that record. I loved the Inhaler record that came out last month as well. I know we kind of talked about them a bit earlier, but I just think they're great, and I think the album is great. Youth Lagoon put out a project last week that I think is amazing. I think those have kind of been my biggest ones of the year so far. And in terms of things that I'm looking forward to, I mean, anyone who's watched my TikTok will not be shocked when I say I could not be more excited for the new Bon Iver record. That is like my number one favorite artist of all time.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
That announcement coming is just like the most exciting thing ever to me. And we kind of got the first half of the album already with the EP in the fall. But I loved the first official single that they put out a couple weeks ago. I think it really, it's cool to see a happier side of Justin Vernon. I'm loving this era for him, and I think it's just really beautiful and fun. And it kind of reminds me a lot of his stuff with his Project Volcano Choir from a while ago. It's just, it's such a great energy to it. I'm really excited about. There's a Blancheville record coming out this year that I'm really excited to hear. A Japanese Breakfast record. That one, I feel like the title is just like meant for me, for melancholy brunettes and sad women. I think it's just perfect. I'm really excited to hear it. I'm really excited about the Hannah Cohen record that's coming out. I've been really impressed by the singles so far. And I just can't wait to hear the whole record. There's a Runner record coming out that I've actually already heard that is so amazing. And I can't wait for that. I think those are probably the big ones that are coming to mind. But there's so much. I think 2025 is going to be a really big year in music, and I'm excited for it.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. And I've talked about this with a couple of my past guests, but a lot of like the mainstream big time heavy hitters released in 2024. And so like some people and even I am kind of like, oh, well, that's going to be like what's going to be happening in 2025. But I think probably from your standpoint, you're thinking like this leaves so much room for an artist to kind of make their mark potentially. If all of these other artists have already released, that would take up a lot of space in people's minds. Now there's all of this room for somebody to come out and put out something really great and it to get to more people.
Yeah, totally. I think, the industry is always ebbing and flowing in that way. And I love to see moments where artists are really able to get their flowers. Obviously I think from last year, everybody talks about Sabrina and Chapel, especially after the Grammys. And, I think watching them both get that level of recognition after they both, have been at this for like a decade, I think it is really cool to watch things just kind of come together in that way for new artists. And just like see people's dreams come true. It's such a cool thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. If this is something where like, if you didn't like this album, you can just say no comment if you want. But I'm curious, there was a lot of buzz around the whole like Ethel Cain album that came out. I don't know if that would fall within, because like it was kind of a very strange experimental album for sure. I don't know if that would fall into the realm of what you listen to, but I'm just curious if you did listen to it.
I think I have so many thoughts on this record. I feel like my brain could just like explode on you right now.
Go for it.
I mean, I think Ethel Cain is obviously like one of my favorite artists that's come out of the past couple years. I think she's just incredible. And I think something that I always think about with especially emerging artists who, have, I guess, kind of like so much ahead of them, like obviously she's had Preacher's Daughter go really crazy. And then, it was kind of a question of, what's going to be next. I think something that I always respect a lot is when an artist is able to like really stand on business and like know very clearly what their vision is and what they want and stick to that. I think along the way, I'm sure 15,000 people told her that this was a fucking crazy idea and, this record was going to go nowhere or whatever, because it's so different from Preacher's Daughter. And, it's a completely different energy, and it didn't really have, traditional singles in the way that, it didn't have an American Teenager or whatever, all of that. I love the fact that she really stuck to what she wanted to do, and she knew how she wanted the record to go, and she didn't really let anybody tell her otherwise. And do I think it's a record that I'm going to listen through all the way through all the time? No, I think I listened through it once, and I've gone back for a couple of the tracks since then, and done some listening on that end. But I don't think it's a project I'm going to listen through all the way through, and I think that's okay though, because I think she's so smart, and I trust her vision, and I think this fits into a bigger picture that we probably won't understand for like another 5 years. And
Sure.
yeah, I always kind of just expect my favorite artists to kind of be smarter than me and have a longer term vision than I do. I think oftentimes people are quick to criticize things before the full picture is there. And I think whatever is coming next for her is going to make all of this make sense.
Yeah, totally. And yeah, I guess that's where it is. So that's what's kind of so cool about the indie genre, is that there is a lot more permission for artists to do like what you said, to just be absolutely themselves. And to take a hold of their vision and basically just try to bring that to be in whatever way they see that. And yeah, like critically, that album has been getting a lot of really, really positive buzz. There is a part of me that does wonder if sometimes critics really jump on something like that just because it is so different, not because they really understand what's happening, but because they're like, whoa, this is so different, but like a good different. Because like obviously there's been times where artists have done something so different and critically it's been like, woof, this is horrible, like don't ever do that again. But I feel like with this specific album, it was widely accepted as like, this is awesome, this is potentially like genre altering or groundbreaking or whatever, like a lot of really positive talk on it.
Totally.
From like probably more of a like casual listener perspective, probably a harder album to really listen to, like you said.
Which is why I think it's been so divisive, It's the type of project that I think you really have to sit with and understand. And a lot of passive fans, listen to American Teenager once, and that's why they're there. Obviously they're never going to get this record, and that's totally okay. I think that's reasonable, not to speak on behalf of Ethel Cain, but, I think that's understandable from my perspective. But yeah, I think, like it or not, I think she did something interesting and she did something different. And I think she knows what she's doing. And I can't help but respect that.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you spoke on another, like I can resonate with you saying Bon Iver is one of your favorite artists ever. I would 100% agree with that. An artist, there's only been a handful of artists that I've followed for pretty much their whole career who've been around for 20 plus years, and Bon Iver is one of them. And he's an example of somebody that has done some drastically different stuff.
Yeah,
that
totally.
A lot of his fans that like loved For Emma, obviously his next album was perfect because it was relatively the same.
Yes.
But then you move from that to, I'm such a sucker for not knowing album names. I can see. Yes, I can see the album cover. I'm so visual. I can see the album cover.
I'm so the same way. I will never remember a song title or an album title, but I can draw the cover for you always. Yeah.
But then going to 22 a Million is like, what in the world? Like, is this?
I remember so vividly. Bon Iver has been like my holy grail for as long as I've been a music fan, and I remember so specifically in high school. I was a senior in high school when 22 a Million came out. And I remember it was a whole event where he was headlining his festival in Eau Claire. And it was the first time he'd played a show in years. And it was a whole thing. And everybody knew it was probably going to be, announcing the album and whatever. And he played through all of 22 a Million in that set. And I was watching the live stream, like on my laptop in high school. And I remember there was like so much anticipation for that moment. And I remember being like, oh my God, this is going to be the best thing ever.
Yeah.
And I remember listening to that set of him playing through all of 22 a Million and just being like, what is this? Like, I was so deeply confused. And I was like, I don't know what's going on. Like, I don't think I like this. Like, this is weird, whatever. And the record came out, I think, like a month after that. And it was one that took a second to grow on me. I will 100% admit that. And I think that that was pretty common for most Bon Iver fans. Like, obviously, it's so different from anything he had done in the past. But, you know, I also think there's a point where we have to trust our favorite artist, because now it's probably my favorite record of his. It's just that is like the pinnacle Bon Iver album nowadays. I feel like, in terms of sonics, I think Firma will always be my favorite, you know, just as a project. Absolutely. I think that it's probably my favorite album of all time. But, you know, if I was really to be judging in terms of like pure musical quality and like doing something different, 100%, I think 22 Million is like the pinnacle for Bon Iver. And like, I mean, I think it's a perfect example of like sometimes things don't necessarily make sense when you first hear them, but we do kind of have to have faith in our favorite artists sometimes, and we just have to know that like they have a vision and they probably know what's up, and it may not be your favorite thing right now, but it probably will be at a point.
I'm like 100% there with you. He basically was like, this is the worst album ever. Like,
totally.
When I heard it, I was like, this is so
it's just
bad.
Like, there is so much about it that just like structurally and sonically makes zero sense. And when you aren't used to listening to something like that, it is deeply jarring, especially when you're coming off of Bon Iver self-titled, where like you were listening to Holocene and Wash and whatever, you know, and it's just like to go from that to that is like craziest job.
Yeah, it absolutely is
crazy.
But I'm also there with you in the sense that I love that album now. And if like, I think that, you know, some people still aren't there with that. And that makes sense, but I do just love experimentation, and I feel like at the moment I wasn't ready for it. Like you said, I just wanted those Hall moments where it's just
I
like
was ready
the most
for a
beautiful
record.
Yeah, it's just so beautiful, and you're like just feeling like you're floating the whole time, and you're like, this is amazing. But then now, like, that's probably the album that I go back to. Just love the emotion that he was able to bring out of some of those sonic like weird things that you were like, I don't know what this is then. And now you're like, what a genius. Like, this guy is a genius. And it's because you can see how what he did there, which that album was 2016, right?
Yes.
2016. And you can see what he did there and how that just like, there's so many things, so many artists, so much of pop is just totally that. It's just all that. And like, obviously the indie scene, the folk scene is really all there as well. But he, like, in a lot of ways, he pioneered that in a similar way. Like, there's these big bands that do that. And at the time, they don't necessarily get their flowers. Sometimes they do, but a lot of the time they don't. And then later on, people are obsessing over them. Like, you can see that with, you know, obviously Radiohead was really popular at the time, but now you're getting all this resurgence of people obsessed over Radiohead, and it makes, you know, original Radiohead fans really mad because they're like, oh, come on. But it's like the reason they're doing that is because they're seeing that, whoa, this band has changed everything. If this band wasn't around, music as we know it wouldn't be around. The Pixies are another example of that, going back further. Like, you can just keep doing that, right, over and over. And
it's very cyclical.
It is.
And I think for me at least, like, one of my favorite things ever is being able to like dissect my own favorite artists' influences. You know, I think I mean, a big one for me was going through LCD's whole catalog, you know, because I'm such a big 1975 fan. I mean, like, Matty Healy himself has said so many times that like the 1975 ultimately, like, they exist because of LCD, and like that's the entire core of the band. And like, being able to go back and see how like so much of what they do is just inspired by or interpolated or like whatever it is of just like old LCD songs is such a fascinating path and just like road to go down. I think understanding the music that like shaped your own favorite artists is just like
totally.
It's such a crazy road.
It is, and a lot of those great artists, like, you don't really see that, like, because nobody would listen to the 1975 and be like, they sound exactly like, you know what I mean? Like, they sound exactly like
they don't
LCD.
Sound like an LCD cover band. But if you really listen to a lot of their songs, like, it is extremely obvious that LCD is the backbone of that band.
Yeah, totally, absolutely, and it's really cool, like, to see these things and I think now I do wonder if the reason why, like, kind of coming all the way back to Ethel Cain, not, and I'm not like, I thought that I listened to it and I was like, I don't fully understand this. I think that it's great, but I don't know. And I'm not going to make an assessment on it, but I do think why a lot of the time now critics really jump on that, and you almost feel like it's gotten to the point where you can almost call when an album comes out and you'll be like, Pitchfork is going to give this over an 8. It's going to be on their trending
You
album.
know exactly.
Yeah, and I think it's because there's kind of this fear of like, I don't want to like not give this album its due, because in 10 years I want to be the reviewer that people look back and they're like, hey, Pitchfork knew that was a
Like
thing.
they knew this was great. Totally.
Yeah.
I mean, I think this is so much of why I don't do like negative reviews.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
if I, you know, had I been making TikToks in 2016 and given 22 a million a bad review at the time,
Mm-hmm.
oh my God, the way I would be kicking myself for that. I would think I was so stupid for thinking that.
Yeah, totally.
And you know, it's just I think music it's something that oftentimes takes a long time to like really understand and really have things come together. And
yeah.
I think to give a review of something after having listened to it 5 times and say like, oh, this is terrible, it's just I could never do it. I would be so paralyzed with fear doing that that I would look back and kick myself or something.
Yeah, absolutely. I literally just had to, I didn't have to, but I literally just put out like an apology video, basically, because I was doing this series where I was basically like ranking the 5 best and 5 worst songs on an album. Sometimes it was people's like artists' whole discography, which is way more difficult. But I did that for Chapel Roan, and I on the first few listens, I didn't love Coffee. I put it as the worst song on the album, and that is the most egregious mistake I have ever made, because now it is my favorite song. And some of that
I've just so been there. I mean, to make you feel a little bit better, my first couple of times hearing Pink Pony Club, I didn't love it.
Yeah.
Which is so crazy looking back, because that is, again, probably top 3 on the album for me. It's such an anthem. Totally. Every time it comes on, if I'm out, I am like the happiest camper on earth. To me, I was just kind of like, I don't know, didn't quite it for me, whatever. And it's just like, it's so crazy. And I think so much of it too is like, I think a cultural moment also totally changes the life of a song.
It
does. Least for me personally. Absolutely. You know, I think being able to do the Hot to Go dance at a festival made that song go from like a great song to like a great song in my head, you know? And I think it is, I feel like with music reviewing, it is hard because you do kind of have to make those judgment calls without knowing any of that cultural context, you know, to review a Chapel Roan record prior to knowing what was going to happen, I think would just be such a tough position to be in, because I think it's so amazing that we can, you know, exist in a space with a song that can make it connect with us more specifically or whatever it is. You know, I think there is so much more to music than just the songs themselves. I think there's
absolutely
special about that.
Yeah, completely. And like, also some of it just has to do with like your mood when you're listening to it. I wasn't in my sad girl era, not that I am now, but once I kind of I just thought she did such an amazing job at her like high energy pop bangers. Like Feminine Nomenon is still like one of my favorite off that. I just love that. The energy she has, I felt like she was just so great at those things, and so I discounted her ballads a little bit more. But then re-listening, I was like, I like as I re-listened more and more, I was like, whoa, she is amazing at ballads too. And I like, as I kind of bought into and gave those a little bit more of a chance, like I was like, wow, Coffee it's a masterpiece, really.
Yeah,
like
totally.
In every way, it really is. So yeah, I just find it's so funny. It's such an interesting space to be in. But that's just the world of art and the world of music, is that it is subjective. Your opinion can change from, you know, matter of minutes. And you can have an album like 22 Million and hate it on initial impact, but then like love it a few years down the road, and everybody mostly loving it. You know what I mean? Like it's and it being like an album that people are like, this shit has shaped pop and folk and, you know, all that stuff. It's pretty crazy.
Yeah, no, it's cool.
And I
Ranking
think
songs is always hard.
I know. And I think probably one of my biggest regrets is not going to see him live on that album tour. Um,
I did go on that album tour, and
you are
I am very grateful to my 17-year-old self for having done that.
you are so lucky. There are very few, like, I guess, tours where I'm like, oh, like just kicking myself. Like I should have gone. That would have been amazing. That'll never happen again.
Yep.
And that is one. I also lived on the east coast of Canada. It wasn't accessible. So I would have had to travel pretty far to probably go
Yeah.
see it. But still, I'm like that would have just been such an amazing tour to see. And there's no way that I'm going to miss him coming through on this new album. So
Same here.
I've just decided, you know what? I can't miss out on seeing him because he's just such a talent, and he's just constantly reinventing himself. And like you said, this new album is going to be so interesting and so different from the last two that he put out. Yeah, but I also love Volcano Choir, so I'm like
Big Volcano Choir fan. If
yeah.
they were to do a Volcano Choir tour nowadays, I would be the first one in line for tickets. I would
Yeah.
be so excited. There are so many songs on, oh my God, on that project that I love.
This has been a lot of fun. I'm super glad that you decided to come on and just chat about music. And I hope that, maybe sometime down the road we can have you on again and just talk about some stuff too, because I really think that you're doing an awesome thing. And I'm definitely going to be keeping up with all of your New Music Friday stuff, because I've been doing it for a while, and it's just so valuable, because unfortunately I'm not going to be able to devote the time in discovering the people that you discover. So I appreciate all the work you do, and yeah, I'm glad that we're able to kind of chat about this.
Totally. I mean, thank you so much for the kind words and for having me. This has been so fun. Yeah, hopefully we can do it again.
Awesome. Yeah, I hope so too. So if you guys are listening and you don't already follow her, go follow Kasey's playlist and come back next week. We'll have another guest on and we'll just be chatting it up. So thanks for listening, and we'll see you guys later.